A very good morning, all of you. I hope I'm audible. Can one of you please respond? Am I audible? Can you please respond? You can either send a message or you can unmute yourselves and tell me. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Yuvraj. And Pranav. And is my screen visible? Is the screen visible to you? Oh, okay. Yeah, I have disabled your microphones because it so happens that all of a sudden there might be a lot of disturbance. I hope the setting is fine with you all. In case you have anything to ask or something, you can always raise the hand, or you can type it in the chat box, or of course, you can ask by the end of the class. Yeah, screen is visible. Thank you very much. I just waited for about 5 minutes so that we have all our students logged in. However, as of now, we've got only 131 of them out of roughly 200 plus. And say also because it's the early morning class, I understand that it might be a little difficult for you all to log in early. Okay, now before we begin today's class, in fact, before we begin with today's topic, let's all just take about half a minute, just about 30 seconds time. Let's all just have a very good thought in our mind. Since it's the early morning class, I want you all to please do this exercise. Okay? All of you, I want you all to just very, very consciously take 30 seconds of your time. Give a very, very good thought. Get a very, very good thought into your mind. Just close your eyes. Bring in a very good thought for yourself and for your community, the place where you live in, your city, your nation, and the whole world. Let's all just bring in this thought of wellness. Let's pray that all of us remain safe. Let us hope that tomorrow is going to be a better day. In fact, even before that, let us just pray that may this day be the best day. Let every day be much better than yesterday. Let every day be much better than what we've spent all these days. Let us all really, really very thoughtfully and with complete love, care, and affection, let us hope that all of us will stay safe and we will see a better tomorrow. We will also pledge that we will serve our community, we will serve our nation in the best possible manner we can do. Please close your eyes for just a minute until I tell you to open. Just close your eyes and wait for just a minute. Okay, let's thank all of us who did it, and please continue to do it quite often as possible. Okay, I hope you're all awake, and with this, let us start with today's class. All fine? Just give me a yes on the chat box. Are you all there? I am. I just began recording, Yuvraj. Oh, thank you. I get so many replies. I'm glad you are all able to respond. Thank you very much. Okay, so starting with today's class, let's just look at what we've done in our earlier classes. We began with the network layer, and we began with discussing what are the design issues in the network layer, what are the services that the network layer provides, and what are the routing algorithms. Now, these were the two important aspects of the network layer that we had discussed. Now, apart from this, in today's class, we will just run through what we've done about the routing algorithms once again, and after which we will move on with the congestion control algorithms, and if possible, we will go on to QoS, that is quality of service. Okay, so we've seen that the network layer is responsible for routing of packets from one element or from one networking element to another networking element. Then we have also seen that it is also responsible for congestion control. It is responsible for priority and scheduling. It's also responsible for forwarding of packets. And we've also seen that why forwarding of packets becomes important, right? Under which we've also then after that we have seen what it means to store and forward, why store and forward might be important. Now, if you just look at this, another important concept here is or about store and forward. It could be two things. One, you want to wait until all the packets of a particular data or of a particular data chunk of data have been received at that particular node, and then you may want to forward one after the other. That is one thing. Another concept that comes into picture here in store and forward is you may want to look at what is happening at the other side of the network, on the other side of the network, before you just simply rush to forward the packets that arrive onto your link. Yeah, so this is what is store and forward packet switching, and this is why in fact store and forward packet switching was used earlier. Today the frequency of using this is a little lesser, but it still has some significance in the network. And this is the connection. There are two services, there are two types of services: connection oriented services and connection less services. This you have done with respect to data link layer also. What is connection oriented service and what is connection less service? If you look at our landline telephone systems, the olden, the landline telephone systems, they are completely connection oriented, right? As in, the telephone at your house, the telephone set at your house is connected by means of a wire. It is connected to the nearest, say, a pole, and poles from different, say, each road has got a pole, and the poles from all these roads are further connected together, and these different poles are connected together, and these poles would be connected to net telephone exchange, the closest or the nearest telephone exchange, and telephone exchanges are connected with each other, and all these telephone exchanges are connected through, let us say, a central exchange center or something like that, right? This is connection. Again, remember, all these connections are completely wired. This is with the traditional telephone system, the traditional landline telephone system. All of them are wired. So there is an availability of service 24/7, right? 24/7, the service that is to be provided to each customer is definitely available. Of course, provided there is no, the line is not dead or the link has not failed or something like that. But otherwise, it is always there, right? Whereas if you look at the connection less services, like let us say, wherein of course, the wireless services, even if you look at, under the wireless services also we have got connection oriented and connection less services. Just that the difference between the connection oriented service in the traditional landline, it is a wired network, but in case of a wireless network, the channel that is being used will be different. But what does it mean to have a connection oriented service in a wireless network? It means that the resources have to be dedicated to that particular communication. That is what it means, right? The resources. Then what are the resources that have to be dedicated? What is the resource in a traditional landline setup? In the wired communication, it is the communication cable or the channel that is provided for communication, right? That has to be dedicated. That in our traditional setup, it is already there, correct? But let us say in the wireless setup, what is it? What do you mean by allocating resources, or keeping the dedicating the allocated resources to that particular communication? What is the resource over there? It is a frequency spectrum, isn't it? You are connected to the, let us say you're connected wireless, your mobile phone. How do you connect? What is the mobile phone connected through? The channel over there is free space. Then what is it that you're using out of that free space? It is that particular frequency band, right? The frequency that you're going to use. So these things have to be completely allocated, or they have to be kept dedicated. They must be dedicated to this particular communication alone. That is what it means to have a connection oriented service, wherein, so that way you are going to have a virtual circuit, right? In the case of, I am giving this analogy with traditional landline so that you understand the differences better. Okay, so with the traditional landline, the circuit is already there. It is all wired circuit, right? It is physically visible to you. Whereas in case of the wireless network, the frequency, which is of course not really visible to us, but these frequencies, the entire length of, or let us say from one point to the destination, from the source until the destination, all the resources have to be kept intact for this particular communication. That is when you call it as a connection oriented service, right? So that is about connectionless and connection oriented service, or nothing but the datagram subnet and the virtual circuit subnet. Datagram is connectionless service, and virtual circuit is a connection oriented service. Fine. After that, we've seen what is Dijkstra's algorithm. It is used for shortest path, finding out the shortest path within a circuit, or from a source to a destination. And why is it required? It is required because we understand that the data that has to be sent across, or the messages that have to be sent across from one point to another point, are broken down into smaller chunks of data. Why is this done? Can you tell me why it is done? I want some of you to please give me an explanation about why the data has to be broken down into smaller chunks. Please type it and put it in this chat box. Why do you agree with this idea of breaking down data? Let us say you have an email that you have to send, and we see that, or we try to understand that the email is not sent as a whole. It may not be sent as one big file itself. It is going to be broken down into smaller parts or smaller chunks of data. And why is this done? This is the question I'm asking. Now, I don't want you to just like someone else's answer and leave. I want most of you to please type in your answers and send it. Let us see. I'll give you about 3 minutes. It's 22 minutes past 8 on my clock. Okay, we have answers coming in. Ayush says router may not have enough memory to store whole data. Fantastic, good. Abhir Shankar says if any data is lost, then smaller amount of data has to be retransmitted. Fantastic, very good. Yuvraj says so the network can handle traffic easier. The nodes become simpler in hardware. I suppose HW stands for hardware. And implementation and error correction and detection is easier. Very good, good. Pranav says as the routers do not have that capacity to transmit data as a whole. Good, correct. Arohi, because there is a need to store it in some cases, and if there is a loss there, a small chunk can be retexted. Okay, any other answers? Anyone else? Think. You are all going to be engineer. You're all to be called engineers, right? So you have to keep thinking, keep on thinking about it. What could be the reasons? What could be the advantages? What could be the disadvantages? Anyone who can talk about its disadvantages? There have to be some pros and some cons, right? Let's see. Let's just have a small discussion. As the routers do not have the capacity. Okay, that's done. Arohi's message I have read. Anirudh Nair says data transmission accuracy is better when transmitted via packets instead of a whole. How do you justify this statement? How do you justify justify saying data transmission accuracy is better? What does data transmission accuracy depend on? Does it really depend on the size of the packet alone? It improves channel utilization. Yeah, good point. Let me just enable your microphones so it's easier for you to answer. I think now you can enable your microphones, those of you who would like to answer. Anyone?
Ma'am, I have a disadvantage.
Shashank Tupil Raju. Shashank, can you try to answer? Shashank isn't here. Pani Pawan? Pani Pawan? Pani Pawan? Vedant Manu? Okay, Pani Pawan, I just wanted the answer from you. Vedant, Manu. So those of you who don't respond, I assume that you're all absent. All right. Fine. So next round of in the next round of questions, we will call out some other names. All of you, please be alert. Okay. Fine. Yeah, Pranav says one disadvantage is reassembly of data has to be done at the receiver side. That's true. That also poses some challenges to the overhead that each packet would carry, isn't it? Since you are dividing the data into smaller chunks, each packet will definitely need, let us say, it needs something like a sequence number or something like that, which is going to tell you where in the entire lot would this particular chunk fall into, right? So yes, this is one of the disadvantages of sending or breaking it down into packets. Okay, so let's move on further. Dijkstra's algorithm, as we've discussed, it is both Dijkstra's algorithm and Bellman-Ford algorithm that we've already learned. They are used for finding out the shortest path from a source to a destination, or let us say from a source to all the other nodes in the network. Okay, and we have also seen how each of them is different from the other. What is the issue with each of them? Okay, these were some of the examples that we took. Can you try to solve this example very quickly? Again, I will give you about 3 minutes time. It's 28 minutes past 8 on my clock. We will come back at 31 minutes past 8. Just try to solve this example. You have to find out the shortest path from, say, node 1. I take node 1 as the source. So considering node 1 as the source, tell me the shortest distance to all the nodes.
Ma'am, can you repeat the destination again?
Be quick. You have to use Dijkstra's algorithm. Any answers? Those of you who were able to solve it, please give me the answers.
Ma'am, what is the destination node? Or shall I tell for all the nodes? Ma'am, is there any destination node or shall I tell the answer for all the nodes?
You can tell me the answer for all the nodes.
Ma'am, if I take node 2 as my source node, then for node number 1, the shortest distance is 3. For,
Oh, I asked you to take node 1 as a source node.
okay, ma'am.
Let us see what answers you get.
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, is the shortest path from node 1 to
Yeah,
4, 5, and then 6?
from node 1. What are you asking?
The path, the node 1 to node 4 to node 5 to node 6.
To all the other nodes. You will be able to find out to all the other nodes. Or let us say node 6. Fine. You
Hmm.
can give me the answer only to node 6. The total cost and let me say the path. Can you try that? You must give me the total cost to 6. In fact, that is what you would have found. Total cost to reach node 6. And what will be the path that it will take?
Ma'am, the cost is 5 and it will go from node 1 to node 4, 4 to 5, and then 5 to 6.
You're saying it would be node 1 to node 4, 1, 4, 5, 6. Is that what you say?
Yes, ma'am.
And the cost would be 2, 3, and 5. Okay, I hope all of you have got this. Let me show you the last answer. Yeah, this is the solution. So as he mentioned, to node 6, the cost is going to be 5 and the path would be 1, 4, 5 and 6. Fine. So I hope all of you were able to do it. Let us move on and we will try to solve one problem with Bellman-Ford algorithm so that you get a good, you are able to refresh your or recollect what we've done. Would you like to try this? Appears a little big, right? We'll take a smaller one. This we have already done. If there's any other example in this, there isn't any other example. Alright, you can try this maybe. The same example that was given here. And you can take this network and we will say the source here is 6. According to this table also you can just see the source is 6. Starting from 6 or from 6 give me the shortest path or the shortest distance to all the other nodes in the network. Please be very quick, don't take much time. Finished? Have you completed?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the answer you get? Let me show you the last answer. Is this what you have got?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's good. Now just look at this example. Moving further, with what happens? What is the issue with Bellman-Ford? You observe that the link over here, that is the link between 3 and 6, the link between 3 and 6 is broken. Okay, the link between 3 and 6 is broken. So what happens then? Just look at what happens to the table and how it changes. What is given here, initial, is what you just got when you solved. Right? That is before the link broke. And what happens after it breaks? This is how the table gets updated. Please try this at your leisure. Okay. Now let's move further on. We have also seen what is the major issue with Bellman-Ford algorithm. It is the counting to infinity problem. This is a major problem in Bellman-Ford algorithm. What does it mean? It means that the nodes wouldn't really immediately get to know if a link has failed, right? If a link has failed, the nodes may not know at all immediately. What do? They keep on getting the update from the other nodes that they have with them, and these nodes would start updating their routing tables accordingly. So this goes on as an infinite loop. Okay, that's why it is known as counting to infinity problem. Now we've also seen what are the remedies. One is the split horizon method and the other one is the Poisson reverse, wherein in the split horizon we've seen that it does not report do not report route to a destination to the neighbor from which the route was learned. So instead of I take it from you but I don't report it back to you, so thereby I am just stopping the loop, right? Or the Poisson reverse remedy is that you report route to a destination to the neighbor from which the route was learned, but you give it as infinite distance, so therefore it automatically breaks the loops immediately, right? So these were the two solutions. After this, we have also seen what is meant by flooding, why flooding is used, what is the use of flooding the packets, and we have also seen what is the disadvantage of it. And then the other modified thing here is limited flooding, so whereby you are limiting or you're reducing the number of packets in the network. After which we have studied what is distance vector routing algorithm, a very important routing algorithm that is used. You just remember that there are two types of protocols. This is an algorithm, of course. What we've seen to find out the route is an algorithm. Protocol would be a package, okay, of what are the packets to be sent, how those packets have to be received, what is the update that has to be done into the routing table based on the packets that were received, and further what has to be done, what is the overhead to be added. All this put together is the routing protocol. Okay, algorithm is just to find out the path. Then what is distance vector routing? There are two distance vector routing. It constructs a one-dimensional array. It consists of the costs to all the other nodes and it distributes this particular vector to all the immediate neighbors. Okay, who are the immediate neighbors? The ones that are directly connected to the node is known as the immediate neighbors. Now, if you look at the graph, you understand that if it is a wired network, there is a wire connecting to the particular node, then they are the neighbors. If it is a wireless network, how do you identify the neighbors? It would be based on the range within which those nodes would be existing. Let us say I am at this particular location. Who are my immediate neighbors? The nodes or the networking elements that lie within the range of my networking element. Those are the immediate neighbors. Okay. Then these are the initial assumptions. We assume that each node knows the cost of the link to each of its directly connected neighbors, and we also assume that a link that is down is assigned with an infinite cost. Then we have seen what is the or how this distance vector routing algorithm goes on to give you the path or to give you the total final routing table or the routing vector, right? So for this example, we have seen that this is nothing but the cost matrix. Okay, so with from each node to every other node in the network, what is the cost, and then what all do we have to see from let us say, if you're going to use this example, then we assume that each node only knows the information in one row of the table. That is, let us say a has only this particular table. This is, remember, it makes use of a one-dimensional array, right? One-dimensional vector. So a has got only this vector. So a knows that to itself the cost is 0, to b the cost is 1, to c the cost is 1. It does not know the cost to d. It knows that to e and f the cost is 1, and it does not know the cost to g. This is the table that it makes. Okay. Similarly, b makes this particular table, c makes this particular table, and that's how it goes on. Okay, this is what is stored in each of the nodes initially, and then what happens, every node sends a message to its directly connected neighbors containing its personal list of distance. So in this example, who does a send its table to? A sends this particular table to its immediate neighbors, who are b, c, e and f. Right. Now, based on this table that A has sent to B, C, D, B, C, E and F, let us say B received this table. What should it understand? B is already a direct neighbor of A, so it has also got its cost. It is 1. B to B, the cost is 0. If you look at the table, B is directly connected. If you look at the graph, B is directly connected to C, so it has got its cost. B is not connected to D. So it will look into A's table if A has got a cost to D. And it sees that A also does not know the cost to D. So it does not apply it. Then B has to look into A's table if it has got a cost to E. Yes, A is connected to E and its cost is 1. So now B has to update its value over here. And how does it update? So it understands that in order to reach node E, it has to go through node A. So what would be the total cost to reach node E through A? B to A, the cost is 1, and A to E, the cost is 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. Therefore, the total cost to reach E from B is going to be 2. And it updates its table that way. Okay. Similarly to all the other nodes. Let us say, for example, node D. D does not know the value to A initially. It does not know the value to B, and it does not know the cost to E and F as well. D is only connected to C, D and G. Right. Now, based on all the values or all the other vectors that it receives, it constructs its own table based on that. Okay. So finally, this would be the final distances stored at each node. Okay, so what does it see? What does it, let us say, for example, we are looking at node D. I want all of you to please observe carefully so you understand, because otherwise it will just go above your heads. Right, so I am looking at node D. How would node D make up its final vector? Right, so how should it do? It has to do it based on the vectors that it receives from the others. Now, what vectors would it be receiving from the others? It would receive from A, B, C, who are its immediate neighbors. D's immediate neighbors are C, D, and G. So, based on the vector it receives from C, D, C, and G, it is going to construct its table, right? So, now let us say it gets a table from C. From C, it understands that it can reach A, right? Because C is connected to A, correct? So, from C to A, the cost is 1, and D to C, the cost is 1. Therefore, it updates that D to A, the total cost will be 2. Okay, it updates that this particular point is going to be 2. Fine. Next, it has to reach B. How would it reach B? Again, it looks into C's table as well as, let us say, G's table. G does not have a route to B, right? But instead C has a route to B. Again, the cost is 1. So therefore, the cost from D to B also is going to be 2. Next, it moves on to E. It does not have the value for E. It sees if C has got anything to do with E. Of course, here it does not have. But after C updates its table, it is going to send it to D. Then, of course, it will have the value to E. Similarly, the value to F, and etc. That's how it goes on making its own table to get this particular vector. Okay, so now all the nodes will know the cost to all the other nodes of the network. This table is very important. The initial table, this one, and this. It's called a global view. You can see this here. It's called the final distances stored at each node as a global view. It's a global view because you are getting a view of the distances from every node to every other node in the network. But if you are asked, let us say, give the final distance, please give the final distance or the final vector of node F, then you are going to write only this. You're going to write only this. Again, for this, you will definitely require applying Bellman-Ford algorithm to all the other nodes as well. Remember, distance vector routing algorithm is based on Bellman-Ford routing. Okay. So this is an example. This is a complete routing table maintained at node B. So in case you are asked, give us the routing table maintained at node B or node G or node F or whatever. This is the table that you have to make up. So you should give the cost to that particular node, and you should also give what will be the next hop in order to reach that node. Okay. Now I want you to please take about 2 minutes time and note down this so you understand as you write, instead of rather just reading through. Just note down this table. Of course, just note down this particular graph. With this, you can easily write this table. I need not really explain anything here. And I want you to give the table with respect to node G. I want you to give the routing table maintained at node G for the same example. I hope my question is clear. I want you to take this example and give me the routing table that will be maintained at node G. G for Gujarat, G. Okay. I'll give you about 5 minutes time. It's 10 minutes to 9 on my clock. We will meet at 5 minutes to 9. That is 8:55. Okay. 174 students. What about the others? 3 out of 174 have answered. What are the others doing?
Got it.
Got it. Huh. What is that, Swapnil? What have you tried to say? A to F. Acha, A has got 2 comma F. Okay. So you are giving me G's table, right? Fine. Huh. So to A, it is the cost is 2 through F. Next node is F. Okay. What about the other nodes? The final table is displayed. Just check your answers. Okay, shall we move on further? Good. So all of you make a note of the answer. Make a note of this table. Please try to find out, verify the answers later on. Okay. Fine. Let's move further. After distance routing algorithm, we have seen what is link state algorithm. All this we have finished, right? Okay, the next one is hierarchical routing. Very simple. You can easily understand this. What is done is, instead of having all the nodes of the network as one network, there is a region specific, or the nodes are divided into certain regions, right? So you see region 1, region 2, 3, 4 and 5 over here, with each region having different number of nodes, right? So you go on routing in a hierarchical fashion. That's it. So what is it that you know? All the routers within a particular region would know the route only to nodes that are in that particular region alone, right? So I do not know who stays in the other locality. I know people only in my locality, correct? But in case I want to reach, or I want to communicate with someone who lives in another locality, what is it that I have to do? There should be some particular what do you say, ahead of that locality, right? So I go through that particular route in order to move. So you can just see this example. This is a complete table, a full table for node 1A without hierarchical routing. If that is not there, then what happens? It understands that, of course, we have not mentioned the cost over here, but instead number of hops have been mentioned, right? So from 1A, if it has to reach 1B, it is at a distance of 1 hop, and immediately it is a neighbor. So fine. Again, 1C is also a neighbor, so the next line would be 1C itself. But if it has to reach, let us say 2D, if it has to reach 2D, then what? How? 2D is in another region, right? So how does it do? It's going to, let us say, it goes through 1B and then to 2A, then to 2B, and then to 2D. Correct? So what is the number of hops? 1, 2, 3, and 4 hops, right? So in order to reach 2D, it goes through 4 hops. Similarly, if it has to reach, let us say, 5E, if it has to reach 5E, then how many hops would it require? It goes through again 2D, which made 4 to 5C. It gives me 5 to 5D, 6 to 5E, 7. Or let us say if it goes through some other route, then it may be taking some lesser number of hops. Or let us say if it goes through 1C, then what happens? So it is 1A to 1C is 1 hop, 1C to 3B is 2 hops, 3B to 4A, 3, 4A to 5A, 4, and 5A to 5E, 5. So it took 5 hops. That's how it has to go if there is no hierarchy arranged. Let us say if there is a hierarchical table, then what happens? How does it differ? It only gives you through which line it can reach that particular region, isn't it? So remember, it should know the cost to all the nodes within its own region. So what will the table consist of? It will consist of 1A to 1A, 1B, and 1C, because these 3 are within this particular region alone. And it will next consider the hop or the line that it should take in order to reach the nodes that are in different regions. So to reach any node in region 2, which is the line it takes, it will take this through 1B. If it has to reach node region 3, then it will take through 1C. Region 4 also to 1C. Region 5 also may be through 1C, depending on the number of hops, etc. So therefore, you see how the number of entries or how the routing table drastically decreases, size of the table decreases by having hierarchical routing. Okay, this is the advantage of hierarchical routing. Okay, so with that, we move on to the next topic, that is about congestion control. Okay, now this I already kind of discussed with an example, right? Congestion control is done both at the data link layer as well as in the network layer. But what is the difference? If you can recall what example I gave you in my previous, in maybe the first class, what is the difference between congestion control with respect to network layer and with respect to data link layer? Remember, data link layer is only hop to hop, correct? Whereas network layer is, it is from source to destination, isn't it? Network layer is from source to destination, whereas data link layer and physical layer is only hop to hop or point to point, correct? So only with the next immediate point it is connected to. Something similar to our the roads that we have got. How does congestion occur in the on these roads, right? If you look at data link layer congestion control algorithms, then it is only with respect to one traffic signal alone, let us say, correct? So by monitoring or by regulating the traffic at one particular traffic signal point alone, you are only regulating the traffic over there, right? But you do not know if regulating the traffic here is going to affect the traffic at some other point in your network, correct? So that is with respect to data link layer, whereas network layer is something similar to something like what you see on, let us say, if you just have a bird's eye view, then you know that how you have to regulate a traffic at one particular point such that it is not really going to affect the other points as well. So regulating the traffic here should not create a bottleneck elsewhere, isn't it? It should not be directly responsible for creating a bottleneck somewhere else. in the network. Correct? So that is very important. So network layer, that's why he has given that network congestion has similarity with congested road traffic. So what is congestion control? Congestion control is a global issue which involves every router and host within that particular subnet. It controls the traffic throughout the network. But flow control, of course, I misspelled it. Congestion control is in the network layer, but analogous to this one is the flow control in data link layer. Flow control algorithms, stop and wait protocol, and whatever, go back and protocol with acknowledgement, all that is for flow control, isn't it? So that is flow control. There it is. The scope of flow control is only from one point to just another point. It just involves a sender and a receiver. But let us say there is a fast, what is that? Fast senders should not and slow receivers. You remember that point? Fast senders and slow receivers, right? So the sending is being very fast, but the receiver is unable to really receive and process that data at the same speed. So then you get this fast sender and slow receiver problem. Again, that is also a part of flow control. That is why all that stop and wait with acknowledgements, with piggybacking and all that has been developed, right? So that is flow control in the data link layer. Now, what is congestion? It is a situation in which there are too many packets that are present in the subnet, and when one part of the subnet is overloaded, it is unable to really perform better, right? So you just look at this graph. On the x-axis you have packets sent, and on the y-axis you've got packets delivered, right? As long as it is fine. Now this horizontal line here gives you the maximum capacity of that particular subnet. So it can reach, if everything is really fine, then it has to be a straight line. That means it is perfect. Whereas if you look at what is desirable, we understand that the number of packets sent is okay. It may be a little plus or minus with respect to the packets delivered. But you look at what happens if the number of packets, when the network is congested, right? So the number of packets delivered would be very, very less. What is the difference? Packets delivered and packets sent. I keep sending packets, but are you able to receive them? How many of those packets have been delivered is important, right? Right? That is, this is this one. So what is the effect of congestion? It is, there might be a delay in the packets. There may be loss of packets. If the packets are lost, they have to be retransmitted once again. So again, it increases the overhead of the, or the increases the load on the network. And thereby, of course, the performance is degraded. Okay. Now, what are the congestion control algorithms? Of course, you understand that the causes. What is the cause of congestion? Congestion occurs when a router receives data faster than it can send it. Right? That is, what is it? Slow receiver, isn't it? Or you say that the packet arrival rate exceeds the outgoing link capacity, isn't it? There are 1,000 packets that are coming in at a particular time, whereas the outgoing link capacity of the router is, let us say, only 100. You observe the huge difference between the two. There are 1,000 packets that are coming in, but it can give out only about 100 packets at a particular time, right? So obviously the incoming line to that router goes on getting overloaded. Right? Then another cause is bursty traffic. What is meant by bursty traffic? It is not really equally distributed, right? At one particular point of time, at one moment, there is a huge amount of data coming in. And let us say after at the next moment, or for the next few minutes of duration, there are no packets at all. And all of a sudden, again, there is a huge amount of data that comes in. This is called bursty traffic, right? And one of the points for one of the causes for this is insufficient bandwidth. and slow hosts or slow processors. The networking element is unable to really process it at the same speed at which it is receiving, and the data simultaneously arriving from multiple lines destined for the same outgoing line. Right, 100 of you, let us say 100 of us are trying to call on the same line, and we want to, or rather we want to reach the same person, then again it becomes bursty traffic. And another cause is the system is not balanced. What does it mean to say the system is not balanced? Again, think about this with a bird eye view. Okay, when you look at the network with a bird eye view, then what do you observe? What do you observe? There may be a bottleneck somewhere in the network, and in some other part of the network it is underutilized, and in some other part of the network it is not really it's not utilized up to its optimum level, or it is underutilized, or there is trying to have an overutilization of some particular line. So this is the imbalance, right? Or another point here is when you try to correct the problem at one particular point, you are ending up with a problem in some other point, or you're just pushing this problem to some other point. You're not trying to resolve the problem, but you're just pushing it to some other place, right? This is called this is what is known as the system not balanced. Now, what are the general principles to be followed for congestion control? One, you have to monitor the system. You have to find out, you have to first detect where is the congestion occurring? When does it usually occur? And then you have to pass on the information to where the action can be taken. Right? Let us say one particular router is undergoing bottleneck. Then you have to pass on this information to all those who are concerned. Isn't it? Something like, let us say we've got these radio updates coming in about traffic. Have you observed this? If you listen to the radio quite often, you observe, especially during the peak hours. Of course, this was in the pre-COVID era. During the peak hours, the radio RJs would give you updates about the traffic. In case you want to go through that particular route, please avoid, because the traffic is congested on this particular road. You please take an alternative road instead, right? So who is it who is responsible for creating the traffic over there? It is the users, isn't it? So instead, you have to inform that particular user or that particular networking element, or whoever or wherever it is necessary, pass on the information so that the action can be taken at the right point, at the right place. And then you adjust the system operation to correct the problem. You adjust the entire operation so that you're able to correct the problem, and not just push it to some other place. So you try to balance the system. Now, how do we reduce the congestion? Of course, one thing you can use this is a very common question, right? How do you reduce congestion of traffic on the roads? Increase the number of roads, or we say widen the roads that are available. Okay. Now, similarly to this network, what do we say? You get additional bandwidth. So thereby you are able to send more and more amount of data. That is one thing. Or you use faster lines. Right, and then you obtain additional lines, and then you utilize some alternate pathways or utilize some spare routers. You look at these points, it's very, very analogous, or it's very similar to what we say when we talk about congestion on the roads, traffic congestion on the roads. We say you build better infrastructure. Then we say you avoid these traffic points, something like expressways or highways and all these, right? Or we say you obtain some additional lines, you add some more alternative roads, all these, right? This is one method. The other method is you decrease the traffic. Similar to what the Delhi government did, isn't it? They said in order to reduce the air pollution, you reduce the traffic. They said odd and even number and all that I mean, all this was talked about in just a few years ago, right? So you decrease the traffic. You send messages to the senders telling them to slow down. You tell them just slow down a little. Let us just, make the situation better. Or you deny service to some users, isn't it? Let us say you have some wireless communication you want to perform, but you are unable to really connect. What does it mean? Your service provider is denying service to you because there is shortage of something over there, right? And then you degrade service to some or all the users. Why? For example, how do you do this? Let us say you're trying to watch a YouTube video. There are options for you to select what is the quality of the video you require, isn't it? The number of, whether you want it in HD or you want it to limit you want to have a lower resolution video is still okay with you, and all this, right? This is all about instead of asking such options, you directly just degrade the service to some of the users. You don't allow some options, you don't allow some services and all this. And then you schedule usage to achieve better load balance. So instead of just having bursty traffic, you schedule the traffic to the user so that you're able to balance the load better. Okay. Now let us see what happens with these two methods. Now there are two ways in which these things are implemented. Congestion control has got two methods. One is open loop method and the other one is a closed loop method. Now under the open loop method, what is done is, open loop method is something like prevention is better than cure. Okay, very, very apt to what we are facing today, isn't it? Instead of just directly going out and having the infection to yourself and then trying to cure the infection, instead you please prevent. Correct? So prevention is always better than cure, isn't it? So that is the open loop solution, wherein you attempt to prevent the problems rather than correcting them. Okay. Next, it does not utilize runtime feedback from the system because it is already trying to just prevent. So it does not really bother about what's happening at the moment in the system. Whereas what is closed loop solution? Closed loop solutions are made during runtime of the network, right? So if there is a congestion, in spite of all this, if there is a congestion, then what should be done? So it's all the contingency plans, something like that, isn't it? So now let us just look at some of these. Congestion control is concerned with efficiently using a network at higher load. Now some techniques that are used here are the warning bit, choke packets, load shedding, random early discard and traffic shaping. The first three, that is warning bit, choke packets and load shedding, they deal with congestion detection and recovery. So you detect and then you try to recover the network. Whereas the last two, that is random early discard and traffic shaping, they are for congestion avoidance. Okay, they are congestion avoidance. Now, how do you say or when do you say that the network is congested? What is the basis for which you say the network is congested? Yes. Now let us say you have a you've got traffic on a road, and when do you start saying that it is congested? With just 10 vehicles on the road, can you say that? Would you agree if someone says, "Hey, the traffic is so congested"? With just 10 vehicles? No, but there is a limit also, right? It cannot be infinite as well. Let us say there are 100 vehicles and it's going on piling up. Then of course you say the traffic is getting congested, right? So similarly, what is the measurement metric you use here in closed loop congestion control is you make use of the percentage of packets discarded due to buffer overflow. The lines are quite self-explanatory, so let me not go in detail with all this. The percentage of packets that are discarded due to buffer overflow, that is one metric. The average queue length. What do you mean by queue length? Each router has got a queue. It has got a memory, right? And all the packets that come into the router and that have to go out of the router are all kept in queue. They stand in a queue, right? So if the average queue length is greater than what it can actually handle, then you say that it is congested. Then the percentage of packets that time out. How do they time out? Let us say there is this time to live, or there is this timeout period. That means a packet can live within a router, let us say, for 10 milliseconds. And if it is not sent after those 10 milliseconds, it is timed out. It cannot be sent, or it should not be sent later on. It has to be discarded, right? So the number of percentage of packets that time out, and then the average packet delay and standard deviation of packet delay. So these are the metrics that are used for closed loop congestion control. Okay. Now, there is another problem here. Congestion causes more congestion, isn't it? Now, let us say the incoming messages have been placed in queues. What happens then? What are the possibilities? We understand that the queue is also finite in size. It cannot be infinite. I cannot have an infinite queue, right? And overflowing queues will, what happens? What will happen? Overflowing queues will cause packets to be dropped. What are the reasons? Again, packet timeout. After some timeout, it cannot be transmitted. So it has to be dropped at that point. Then long queue delays will cause packets to be resent, because let us say I have not received an acknowledgement due to something, due to this congestion. Then what do? I understand that the packet has not reached the destination, so I resend that packet. So again, it is going to cause overhead, isn't it? And then dropped packets will cause packets to be resent again. So you see the disadvantages of this. And if the senders that are trying to transmit to a congested destination also become congested, I am trying to send to a congested destination, then what happens? But I am unable to send because the destination is congested. But the system is continuously generating data, generating packets. They must be continually resent. Those have been dropped or those have been timed out, have to be continuously resent. So therefore, there is a congestion in myself also, right, within this particular node also. And then they must continue to hold the outgoing or the unacknowledged messages in the memory. As long as I get an acknowledgement, I have to wait, isn't it? I cannot delete the packet that is generated within this system unless I get an acknowledgement. So therefore, until I get an acknowledgement, this packet has to be stored. Again, overhead in the memory. So you look at the beauty of these techniques that are used, or the beauty of the challenges that are faced. It's so nice, isn't it? It's so beautiful to really understand. You have to be able to comprehend all this as network engineers. There are so many things that have to be dealt with, right? So this is one. This is what happens in case of virtual circuit subnets. If there is a virtual circuit, then what happens? You just look at this particular figure A and B. In figure A, there is a congestion at 2 points, right? Look at figure A. It is a congested subnet. There is a congestion that is seen in 2 points. And figure B, it's a redrawn subnet that eliminates that link itself, isn't it? So what is it? It is admission control, wherein once congestion has been signaled, no more virtual circuits are set up until that particular problem goes away, right? So no new virtual circuits will be done or will be set up until that congestion is cleared off. Another way with virtual circuit subnets is to allow new virtual circuits but carefully route them through around the problem areas. You see to it that the circuits are not going to go through the problematic areas only. Okay. Now, this is another strategy, is to negotiate an agreement between the host and the subnet before the circuit is set up. So if you and I have to have a virtual circuit, then the entire route from the source to the destination, everybody would come, all of them would go hand in hand. So they are all going to come within the agreement policy between the source and the destination, or the host and the subnet. That is, the host asks the subnet, so this is the volume of traffic that I would like to send. This is the amount of time that I would like to take.
and this is the shape of the traffic. This is the QoS required and all that. So the network service provider or the subnet will have to reserve all these resources along the entire path in which the circuit is set up. Therefore, it will be able to manage. But what is a disadvantage here? It's a wastage of resources, right? Because in case there is no data that will be sent, of course the host says this is the amount of data, but let us assume that if you look at the other contrary, that the host does not send any data at all, then of course all the resources that are dedicated to this line goes waste, right? This is a disadvantage. Now, another control system in datagram subnets is sending a warning bit. It's quite simple in this figure, right? So a warning bit would be a very special bit in the packet header, and it is set. When I say it is set, just observe it's a bit, right? So it's either 0 or it is 1. So if there is a warning to be sent, this particular bit would be set by the router to warn the source when congestion is detected, and this bit would be copied and piggybacked on the acknowledgement that is sent to the sender. Right now, the sender will monitor the number of acknowledgement packets it receives along with the warning bit set, and therefore it goes on adjusting its transmission rate accordingly. So as soon, it's not that as soon as it gets one packet marked with the warning bit, it is going to reduce immediately or something like that. It observes for over a period of time, and accordingly it goes on adjusting its transmission rate. Just make a note of this. It's an important expression that you'll have to remember. Now, how would it adjust its transmission rate? It is based on this particular expression. So the utilization, it monitors the utilization of its output lines and the other resources, and the recent utilization of the output line. Okay, so finally it decides the new utilization is going to be based on this particular expression, where F is a sample of the instantaneous line utilization, whether it is 0, whether it has been utilized or it has not been utilized at all, and A, the variable A, it's a constant. A is a constant. It determines how fast the router forgets recent history. Okay. Okay. We will do this in the next class. It's already 31 minutes past 9. We will stop over here. That is, we will stop at this technique of warning bits, sending warning bits. The next, that is back pressure method and the choke packet method, we will do in the next class. If we shall do it this in the next class. Okay. With this, I will stop sharing the screen. Just before that, let me download the attendance. Now, if you've got any doubts with today's class, you may raise. Yes? Anything? Okay, so if there's nothing, then okay, I hope you have all understood what we've dealt with today. Let me stop recording. Right. All right, so with this, let's conclude today's class. I hope you have all understood what we've done. We'll have a very quick recap of all this in our next class, in my next class, and then we will continue with the remaining portions of the subject. Okay. Okay, then all of you have a good day ahead. Again, Let's all pray that all of us are safe. Take care of yourselves, of your family members, of your surroundings. Be a very, very, very responsible citizen. Stay safe. Just stay home and stay safe. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.